because I do think if Deontay Wilder hits him, he's going to knock him out.
Anthony Joshua is one of those guys that he does take things to heart.
Just get in with Deontay Wilder and get on with it.
And I think when he's gone, people are going to miss him.
By the way, Derek, you know where I live, do you? If you do, you can bring that bleeding money around that you owe me. Welcome to Talk Boxing with Simon Jordan and Spencer Oliver. It's episode 38, all those that you can't count, and I'm being asked to read something that I'm struggling with. Apparently I'm back in the hot seat where I belong, and Spencer has done a stellar job. That's the part I'm having trouble reading.
What,
but I am back.
What, the hot seat?
The stellar job part.
Oh, sorry.
But I am back. For those that love Carl Froch, I'm sorry. He's away sunbathing his nose. Myself and Spencer are here. Going to chew over the fact and go back chew over the fact and go back to where we started from, which is looking at things through a very strident point of view. But I did have to say, I did watch you two guys while I was away, and I thought you were really good. I thought you were really good at hosting a show, and I thought Carl is a unique perspective and gives unique views, isn't he? And he doesn't care, and he's very authentic, and he says what he thinks, and he stands it up. He has great belief in himself, and I think Carl was brilliant, and you both were really good together.
Thank you.
So I'll be happy to vacate the seat again anytime soon.
Good to have you back, Simon.
Anyway,
it's good to have you back.
Nice to be back. Listen, it makes sense to segue first of all into the big fight on the weekend and all that went with it. Obviously, Anthony Joshua versus Robert Helenius. We know the backstory of the Dillian Whyte situation and the failed drug test. And again, all that went with that. I suppose we can dive straight in to the overall experience. Anthony Joshua did his job. He won the fight.
Yeah.
And it leads on to other things. But what was your overall takeaway from the whole experience, from the week, from the debacle that was Dillian Whyte, and the loss of the fight, and a real fight that I thought was going to be fascinating and massively intriguing, onto the situation with a late replacement, onto Anthony's performance?
Yeah, listen, I think that Anthony, he came, he saw, and he conquered. He achieved what he went out and set out to achieve. You know, he said himself, why should I, because the public want me to go out there and knock him out straight away and make this statement. He went out there, he was feeling his way into it. So my assessment of it was, I think he was controlling it well. He was showing better footwork than we've seen before. Derek James has definitely been working on that stuff. There was a smoother movement around what he was doing. Defensively, he was good, and he was showing good patience. And he waited for his time. And when the time come, he executed the finish perfectly.
Did you think?
I think it was overall solid performance, and I think what he's got from it, because this was all about Anthony Joshua and reinstalling that confidence in his own ability, and I think he's achieved that with a show reel knockout, and I think that was the importance of it, Simon. It weren't about, for him, Joshua, oh come on, let's get out there, because the crowd were booing, which I thought were a little bit harsh.
Yeah.
You know,
a segment of the crowd, not the entire crowd.
Yeah, segment. Yeah, but I thought that was a little harsh, because I think what we saw was, and what we needed was Anthony Joshua to go out there and do what he done. And I think that moving forward, you know, there's people still saying now, I think he needs another fight before Deontay Wilder. Why? You know, he's got what he wanted out of the fight.
Yeah, I'm in the same space as that.
I think it's now time for him to go on and you know, we want the best fights of this modern era. They were important, and we get that. We thought at one stage we were never going to get it. Now we've got a chance to get it with everyone. Hopefully we get Fury, Usyk, Joshua Wilder, winner versus winner. And I think that now these guys have got their warm-ups out of the way. It's important.
I didn't go to the fight. I made a conscious decision not to go. Was very enthused by the Dillian Whyte fight, because I felt it was a live one. I felt that there was real malice in that fight, and that Anthony would be dragged into something that we're going to see him being dragged into at some point again in his career, which was a bit of a battle. And we were going to learn the lessons as to whether Anthony, we all know that Anthony physically is able to execute. We all know that the physicality of the man is capable of delivering outcomes that we saw on Saturday. The question that people will ask consistently is, the moment he's put under pressure, is that mentality that people are debating there anymore, that preparedness to accept going into a dark place, that preparedness to put himself in range to be able to let his hands go, that ability to throw combinations and to put himself in a way of knocking someone out sometimes means you put yourself in a way of risk. And it was really interesting to listen to some of the commentary from you boys, but also the commentary from Barry Jones and from Andy Lee. And Tony Bellew. Tony Bellew was really skewed towards everything Anthony Joshua did, albeit contradicted himself at the very end by suggesting that Anthony Joshua shouldn't be fighting Deontay Wilder.
Yeah, sure.
I came away from that fight, in terms of watching it, because I watched it on DAZN, and I was neither disappointed or elated by the performance. I thought that he did the job that I expected him to do. I expected him to knock him out. The fella was put in there to some extent to be knocked out. The comparison that he was going to have was, if you don't knock him out in round 1, then you're not going to be at the same level as Deontay Wilder.
Sure.
But Robert Helenius didn't fight the same way
I'm glad you
that he
picked up on
fought
that. Yeah.
Deontay Wilder. So he picked, you know, he sort of poked and pecked.
He come out and he
Joshua
kept his range.
kept him at range.
When he boxed Deontay Wilder, he took the fight straight to Wilder. He tried to bully him,
and he
tried
got
to push
knocked
him on
out.
the back foot, because that's how Fury beat Wilder and beat him easier. But it wasn't educated in anything he'd done. He got reckless and he paid the price.
And he's also not at that level either.
Yeah. And I think with Joshua, he's come out and he's played a smart game. I thought Helenius, he was pushing out the jab, keeping it at range, and Joshua was smart into not taking the risk and thinking, right, I'll just set up my time, wait for the right opportunity, and boom, let the shot
wait
go.
for him to slow down.
So I think I took a lot away from the Joshua performance, as in I'm thinking that was perfectly executed. The timing was good. You didn't take the risks. You know what you got to do going into the Deontay Wilder. You have to put him on the back foot, but it's got to be educated. You've got to work everything off the jab, because Wilder, there's a lot of flaws in what Deontay Wilder does, and he's very reckless. And if Joshua holds himself,
we built, all of us, me included, and I do think this is a difficult fight for Anthony Joshua, because I do think if Deontay Wilder hits him, he's going to knock him out. And I suppose it'll be like a lot of people saying, it's a bit of a shootout.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if it will be that, but the bottom line is that what I saw on Saturday was Anthony Joshua doing something that I never doubted that he could do, which is execute.
Yeah.
I think it was sensible what he did in terms of he waited for his time. He waited for Helenius to start to slow down, because the worst case scenario, and people were saying it, and we said it before, was you let this guy into the fight, you let this guy build confidence, you let the crowd start to turn and get on Anthony Joshua's back, and all of a sudden you've got a perfect storm of a problem for Anthony Joshua, and it wasn't. And to me, it didn't really matter. I've been a critic of his, but it didn't really matter to me that he knocked him out in the 7th round, or he knocked him out in the 1st. Now, some will say, but Robert Helenius, you know, it's like that old expression, isn't it, when Frank Bruno fought Tim Witherspoon, I ain't going to hit you with no spoon. Deontay Wilder is not going to be fanning about in the same way that Robert Helenius is. So there is a difference in this situation. But I'm in the camp with you, and I think you're deep in this camp. I don't see the point of any more fights.
No.
You know,
what's the purpose of that?
You know, if he's gained confidence, if his confidence has been regained to some extent by knocking out Helenius, right, he still can be knocked out of him again when he goes into another fight, when he gets punched in the face. And he's going to go into a space, isn't he, which is fight or flight. When he goes in, if he's fortunate enough to go in, and Deontay Wilder hangs his chin out in the first round and Anthony Joshua knocks him out, then job done, everybody thinks it's wonderful.
Absolutely.
If he gets dragged into a slightly darker place, we're going to learn, and only learn in that fight, whether Anthony wants to fight or flight.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, Anthony has to sit in the pocket to some extent with Deontay Wilder. But like I say, he's got to set everything up with the jab, sort of keep that space. We know what Wilder's like, and he's reckless, and there's a lot of flaws, and he goes wild. But if he hits you, you're going to sleep. That is a fact, and that happens in heavyweight boxing,
and vice versa.
I think what we saw with Helenius, with Joshua as well, was that Joshua had been working on stuff, not just with his foot movement, it looked a lot smoother, but he was defensively, he was sort of catching shots. I hadn't seen that from him before. He's normally just holds his hands up high, but he was sort of catching shots. He recognises that he's going to have to be in a fight with Wilder, and it's going to be a shootout. But what I'm saying is, where Joshua goes straight through the middle, Wilder does everything round. So if he keeps nice and tight and comes through the middle, he's got a great chance. If he hits any heavyweight in the world, like he hit Helenius on Saturday night, they are going to sleep. Fact. So I'm in that camp. Look, Josh has done what he's had to do. He's reinstalled that confidence in his own ability to knock people out.
But he also needs, and I took his point in the way that he meant it. There was a couple of things I thought he said in the ring that were unnecessary. But the thing he talked about, leave me alone, I think is right, because I think this poor sod sometimes doesn't know what he wants to be, because he's got so many people telling him what he needs to be, right? So many people saying he's had an amateur career, a very short amateur career, he hasn't got the pedigree to know what to do when you get into big experiences and challenging moments, or he doesn't do this, he's not a boxer, he shouldn't do this, ultimately he's this, and eventually he lands in a space where he doesn't know at times whether he's Arthur or Martha.
Absolutely.
And he's got a load of background noise, and he's got a lot of people telling him what he should and shouldn't do, and really and truly what Anthony Joshua needs to be is true to himself. He's kind of saying, leave me alone, I'm going to do my own thing, right? It wasn't expressed as well as it could have been, but the point is I'm going to fight the way I want to fight, and that's the end of the discussion. And I do think it's a very challenging landscape for him, because he's been built up to this pedestal, and now he's got everybody in his ear after what happened to him with Ruiz, and then what happened to him, you know, with Usyk. And And by the way, these losses to Usyk, despite the fact that he shouldn't have fought the first fight the way he fought this fight, he is fighting an elite fighter.
Absolutely.
Right? And I don't think he needs to be broken down to its lowest common denominator and built back up again.
Yeah.
I think there was fundamentals against an elite fighter like Usyk that he's going to struggle with.
Yeah.
But they're not the same fundamentals that he's going to struggle with against Deontay Wilder. So this confidence issue that people are suggesting, the best way for him is to get out of this country and go and have this fight in Saudi Arabia and get on with it.
Totally agree.
And we're going to know.
You know, listen, I think that people have been too harsh on Anthony Joshua. That is a fact. It's not because I'm a Joshua fanboy or because I know him on a personal level. I just think that, you know, with this guy and his legacy of what he's done and he's inspired millions of kids with where he come from to where he's got to. We know the whole backstory and the journey along the way. And I just think, you know, there should be some respect put on his name for what he's achieved, and it's not over yet. You know, look, we're now at a point where if he goes out there and he flattens Deontay Wilder, and I know that everyone, you'll be getting messages everywhere saying that's not happening, mate, and all that. Give him a chance. Let's see. At least he's taking the fights and creating modern eras of fights that we need, because when Anthony Joshua's gone and it's over, like on Saturday night, that was an event. That was a massive event. The atmosphere in there was huge, and you know, people love it. Like, and I think when he's gone, people are going to miss him from the sport of boxing. I think he's transformed boxing in this country. That is for sure.
There is charisma in the Tyson Fury camp as well. So if Anthony Joshua disappears off the radar, there are other fighters that can operate at the highest level, and he's a massive part of it. And no one's ever decried that or denied that. The only thing that people like me have pushed back on, because I've often believed that the hype around Anthony is bigger than the reality.
Sure.
And my criticism isn't of Anthony Joshua as a man, because it takes an inordinate amount of courage to get in a ring, fight the way he does, and to win 2 heavyweight titles.
Sure.
My criticism has always been the guys that are putting him at the level that he's at are the ones that I have a problem with, because it's a false representation. Anthony Joshua is a very good fighter. He's fought decent fighters, but when you look at the body of work, there are questions about some of the fights that he's had. An aging Klitschko, Brazil and Molina were average fighters that weren't big, particularly good fighters. We're not living in a stellar generation of the times in the past where we've seen Lennox Lewis having to fight Razor Ruddock, or having to fight other names like Hazim Rahman and so on and so forth. So I look at it and think the situation for Anthony now is no more fights. Well, just get in with Deontay Wilder and get on with it.
I think he's at that stage in his career as well where he says, you know what, I just want the big fights now. I want to cement my place, you know, in history by fighting Deontay Wilder, by fighting Tyson Fury, maybe doing a trilogy as well with Alexander Usyk. Because them fights are out there. You know, we got to remember, what's he got left? Probably 3 or 4 fights, maybe at this sort of level. Anthony Joshua, you know, they all probably have. But you know, so that's why we need these fights sooner rather than later.
Derek James is a brilliant trainer, right? And, you know, to some extent, the other day with the Crawford-Spence fight, he got up against another brilliant trainer who out-talked him in Bomac, right?
Yeah.
And so, you know, Derek James isn't the be-all and end-all, but this idea that they're going to reconstruct Anthony Joshua, I suspect, has a strength that he needs to utilise, and I worry that there's too much changing of Anthony Joshua to get him to what they're adding to him, they're subtracting away from somewhere else.
Yeah.
Anthony's strength was to put it on people.
Absolutely.
And that's being taken away. And now people are saying that's because he's become wiser and cleverer, and that may be right. And we'll only know that when he gets in against fighters where that becomes tested. Yeah. And you'll say, and maybe you're right, that the way that he fought Robert Helenius was the right way to fight him, because Robert Helenius was someone that you needed to be cautious with. Yeah, but I'm also willing to wager you that 5 years ago, before all this tinkering and fun, these challenges, Anthony Joshua would have got in that ring and knocked him out in a couple of rounds. And
the reason that may have happened was because pre-Andy Ruiz, or maybe even pre-Klitschko, you know, Anthony Joshua fought with that rawness, but it was a little reckless. And so, you know, and when you pay the price for that, then they call that experience, and you go, right, I've learned from that mistake. And that's what he done when he went out there with Helenius, and from a boxer's mindset, I know you go out there and he thinks, right, this kid's a bit tricky, he's long, he's tall, he's rangy, I'm not going to make any silly shots, because Helenius is heavy-handed with that right hand through the middle, and you think, I've just got to take my time, wait for my time, and you know when the right time is. And I think that's pretty much what Joshua was saying. Listen, I know that everyone wanted this showreel knockout in 3 rounds, but it weren't there in 3 rounds, and I know where I'm at, and I know what I've got to do, and taking from what I need to take from it, I got the knockout I needed, and that sets me up for the Wilder fight.
And the job done.
Yeah, I mean, what did you make of the performance as a whole? Was you satisfied with
what you saw? I thought it was okay. I thought the end justifies the means.
Yeah.
I thought that I would have liked to have seen him close the gap quicker. I'd like to have seen him get his feet in a position a little bit quicker, and let his hands go a little bit more. And he was saying, I know he was saying, I can't find the right hand. I can't find the right hand. He found it eventually.
I'll tell you why he couldn't find the right hand. Sorry, because like from the opening bell, we was doing this in commentary as well. So, and this is where he was growing in confidence as the fight was going on. From the opening bell, when he started out first round and Helenius nicked the first round, he was throwing the right hand, but sort of actually coming away from it. He had no confidence in stepping in and letting the shot go. Second round, third round, then he started holding his feet and sort of leaning forward.
And about the fifth,
and
he started
reaching.
to go.
But in the fifth round, he started moving his feet before he threw his shot, because you've got to move your feet into range before you land the shots. And if you see that knockout in the seventh round, he touched downstairs and then he touched again, stepped in with a foot and boom, done it. That's all he had to do, was step in with the feet. But he felt that, you know, the time, it was all about the timing of it. But when you're stepping in with your shot, shows the confidence in your own ability. When you're holding your feet, shows you're lacking that confidence. And I think that's what we saw through the fight. So
and that's what Derek James was urging him to do, wasn't he?
Stepping with the feet.
Him to do. What did you think of Helenius? What did you think of him as an opponent? I actually think this nonsense about him fighting a week earlier. He said it himself. You know, you spar. I had a 3-round fight with someone that didn't lay a glove on me. Right? So I think he was ready to fight.
Absolutely, he was in great shape, mate. He was in great. I spoke to him in the hotel after actually, and he said, "Listen, this was about the opportunity, and I was in great shape, no excuses. I felt that I was doing all right in the fight, and Joshua caught me with a shot. And he said, and that happens. He said, if he hits you, he goes, that's it. And he said, and that's where I was at. He said, it was none. He said, I felt as good as I've ever felt, and I was like, well, fair play for you for saying that. He come in there, he was in shape. He looked in shape on the scales. Yeah. So I was satisfied. I thought actually it was the perfect opponent for Anthony Joshua. You know, going into this Deontay Wilder fight, I thought this guy is perfect for you, because you know it's got everything that you need there. He's going to give you the rounds that you need. You're going to get the confidence that you need, and you've got the knockout you need. So perfect.
Yeah, I just want Anthony now. I think I spoke to Michael Jarman over the weekend and said to him, I just want him now. Insofar as I'm interested in getting down to the micro mechanics of what he's doing, I'd like him to get rid of all the background noise.
Yeah.
Because what I saw was reactions after the fight to certain things. What did you think about? I thought it was something that should have been said about him rather than he said himself. He talked about, my back's hurting because I'm carrying the heavyweight division.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that maybe Eddie Hearn could have said for him, or someone else, right? Rather than Anthony saying it, because there is a matter of Daniel Dubois fighting Alexander Usyk in 2 weeks' time, and I think it gives Anthony. There's no need for that observation.
Do you know what it is with Anthony? And I don't know why he does this, and I'll need to have a conversation with him about it, because we got it out in Saudi where he's sort of like, I think it's where his adrenaline's pumping so much, he does strange things like straight after the fight, and I think that Helenius was still down, it was a heavy knockout, he's jumped out of the ring and he's gone around the ring and he's gone back. I just think that he lets his emotions get the better of him, and I think what it was for him there was he got what he needed from it. It was that knockout.
Release the pressure.
He was so pumped and so hyped, he hasn't thought about what he was doing, and then that bit at the end when he's saying, I feel like I'm carrying, my back, I'm carrying the heavyweight division.
Yeah,
I get it. It's a bit tongue-in-cheek.
I don't want to take it literally, but I would have preferred that someone else said it for him, because what I did feel, and that point you make is a very good point, was that there's such a release of pressure, and some way or another, he's got to find a way to manage that pressure.
Absolutely.
Because I think it affects him. I think it changes his outlook on things. I think it might even change the way he fights because of the expectation level. It's easier said than done.
I think actually, Simon, he was feeling
relief. I think it was.
But the relief, but also like Anthony Joshua is one of those guys that he does take things to heart, and like I think he thinks that knockout that will change the public reception of me, that I can't.
But he needs not worry about that.
Yeah, no, but he's like that.
He needs not worry about that.
And I think that's what he needs to leave at the door and get on with what doing.
It's difficult because of the amount of expectation upon him. You see a show that we did on Friday from the shopping centre, and there's not many fighters. Tyson might be able to do it as well, but there's not many fighters that are going to be able to command a full shopping centre just for a weigh-in. Right? And that's the superstar status that he has. But I think for him, the background noise and the pressure that he feels, and because the moment he landed on Helenius, he's doing a little dance, and he wants to go out and celebrate with the audience. Some would say, well, hang on a second, what about the guy laying on the floor? I would not criticise him for that. I would think that ultimately it's about relief, and someone's got to help him manage that better, because the only way that Anthony Joshua is going to go past people like Deontay Wilder is if he's solely focused, no background noise, fighting the fight that he wants to fight without any distractions, without anything other than the value added that he needs to beat Deontay Wilder. And I'm now in the camp, and I've been against this camp, and I've been sort of saying, I can't see him. I can see Deontay Wilder detonating on his chin. And then when you look at it and you pair back and you go, well, what's he done recently so wonderful?
Listen, he's damaged goods as well.
He's damaged goods as well.
Absolutely.
He's got his own challenges because he's got beat up twice by Tyson Fury, and
he's
probably
got a lot
3
of flaws
times
in what he does as well.
And he can get knocked down because we've been seeing it get knocked down and pretty much knocked to pieces by Tyson Fury, who doesn't hit as heavy as Anthony Joshua.
I'm glad you said that. That's exactly right. When Joshua punches, when you're at ringside, we know what Fury's like. He's sort of like, he peppers and he breaks them down and breaks them up, and he's great at what he does. He's unbelievable. He controls the distance. He's very hard to hit. But with Joshua, when he hits an opponent and you're sitting at ringside, you sort of feel the vibrations of the shot. He's got phenomenal punch power, and I think Deontay Wilder, he's got
to get in range to throw it.
Yeah, but Deontay Wilder will put him in range because Deontay Wilder's very explosive, but he's reckless in what he does. If AJ's patient, he hasn't got to move in. He can let Wilder come to him, but he's got to hold his feet.
Because I'm not based upon Helenius and not based upon that outcome. My mindset is slightly changing. I still think if you asked me to put my last pound on who would win against Wilder, Joshua, I would still probably at a push put it on Deontay Wilder.
Yeah.
Because I think that Wilder I think he's going to land on Anthony.
Yeah.
And if he lands, I think Anthony will go down. And then I think we'll be back into a territory of all the demons coming back again. But it's not as cut and dried as it was before.
No.
If you'd asked me, it was like, nah, done, Deontay Wilder, done, forget it. When I look at it now, I think to myself, well, let's have a look at Deontay Wilder. Right? Okay, he's knocked out a 41-year-old Luis Ortiz that was beating him up until he landed a big bomb. Right?
That's right.
And you look at who's fought over the years, and his record ain't that impressive. You know, Roman Stavern, and people of that nature, they were decent, right? But not world beaters. And then you look at the fact that, with due respect to Deontay, he was beaten 3 times by Tyson Fury. He was beaten in the draw, and that was a Tyson Fury that had been laid off for a significant period of time. He was beaten.
In the second fight, he was beaten
Properly
in his own game.
Beaten in his own game.
Fury
in the third game, he was beaten in a war.
Absolutely,
right?
yeah.
So he's got that psychological baggage. And if he gets one stuck on him by Anthony Joshua, then he's going to be in the same space. He's going to be in the same space.
Yeah.
So I think it's actually, of all the heavyweight fights, I think it's the most intriguing.
I'm with you.
I genuinely think it's the most intriguing because it's a gunfight in certain people's minds, and it's a balance of 2 guys that we know that can throw the heaviest punches in the division, with Dubois that can hit heavy as well. But someone is going to get knocked out relatively quickly.
Listen, I'm with you. From a fan's point of view, Deontay Wilder, Anthony Joshua is far more explosive than Fury Usyk, which is going to be a technical match. That's for the purists. That's for the purists, and that's to find out who's the undisputed.
Well, this is all assuming that Daniel Dubois.
But come on, we want to see that fight now.
This is all assuming, and we're going to see that fight. I'm pretty sure we're going to see the fight. But I'm pretty sure we are.
Yeah.
Right? But that's all assuming the Usyk component part is not. Frank Warren will have us believe emphatically that Daniel Dubois is going to do a number.
He's a live wire, though, Daniel Dubois. He's a live wire. You know, forget what happened.
Well, he's going to do. And we're not going to discuss it too much because we'll do that after the fight, I suspect. But he's going to do to Usyk, or try and do to Usyk what Anthony should have done in the first fight.
Absolutely. I spoke to Don Charles, who's training Daniel Dubois, and they've been out in Spain. They're up in altitude. The sparring he's had out there is incredible. The people that he's got out there sparring. Don says to me, listen, we know what we got to do. We know exactly what it is. And if he can implement what we've been working on in that ring, he's got a real chance. He has got a chance. He's a young heavyweight, you know.
If Daniel Dubois hits him, steps in and hits him, and lands, Usyk's not been hit that way.
No, he's heavy-handed.
He's heavy-handed. He's had Derek maul him. Yeah. He's had Anthony Joshua fight amongst himself rather than the fight that was in front of him. And if Dubois sticks it on him, there's a distinct possibility Usyk could find himself in trouble.
Dubois has to stick it on him. That's the point. Because if Usyk gets into a river, we've seen what happens. But it's a good fight. And we were out there covering it.
Last week in the studio, we had Eddie Hearn come in again.
Yeah.
And as it often does, it descends into a very strong difference of opinions. And people that have their views on Eddie and me tend to alight upon who they like best, right?
Yeah.
So the Eddie Hearn people that believe that Eddie Hearn is a second coming will say that Eddie taught this idiot a lesson, he doesn't know what he's talking about. And people that don't like Eddie Hearn will say, well, Simon made some very significant points. But I do feel that without being obsessed by it, Spence, there's a lot of stuff that gets said in these discussions, and a lot of it gets missed. And I just want to land a few points, not because Eddie's not sat here and can't defend himself, but I want to land a few points where people can percolate over it and work out for themselves what they think the reality of the situation is. The first scenario is that the 2 debates, whatever you want to call them, I'd call them bun fights, quite frankly, where Eddie's come into the studio at talkSPORT.
Entertainment, mate.
Well, they are.
It's entertainment.
I'm sure they are for the listening
Absolutely.
public. For me, there were 2 interviews that I didn't ask for. Eddie and DAZN wanted to come in the studio and wanted to be able to have a debate, and Eddie comes in swaggering about the big numbers that they get, which is great because he does, because he's a showman. But there was also this. Eddie is brilliant, a master at taking you away from the subject matter and involving you in minutiae and incidentals.
Yeah.
And the discussion that we had last week was about the situation with Joshua and the White fight and the cancellation of it. And Eddie latched upon a point where I had asked Robert Smith, which, by the way, I can ask who I want, what I want, when I want,
sure.
and no one's betraying any particular confidences.
It's called that is called journalism, though. You're doing your research into what the
I bristle at the notion
are.
that I'm a journalist, but
but I'm saying if we work in the media, we make phone calls to get facts. We do that.
But also, by the same token, we've got form here. Robert Smith's been on interviews talking about how the British Boxing Board of Control are going to run things properly. When a drugs test is failed, you'd expect the British Boxing Board of Control to be on the front foot.
Yeah.
And so when I'd asked Robert about when did you cancel the fight, he said the moment we heard it from Eddie Hearn. Now, for some reason or other, best known to me, in the conversation when I was talking to Eddie about their behaviour, my point was the moment you and the British Boxing Board of Control knew about the fight, you cancelled it.
Yeah.
So well done you.
Yeah.
But for some reason or other, I said Saturday rather than Friday. Eddie jumps up on it and says,
Well, you
hang
said
on
Friday
a second.
rather than Saturday.
I said you knew about it Friday and cancelled it on Friday. Eddie's assumption for the purpose of the conversation was I said Friday and you only cancelled it to Saturday, so what was delayed? That wasn't the point I was making. And then they got lost in this, you talk about facts and you don't know what you're talking about and you don't know the level of this and you don't know the level of that. And to be fair, in comparison to Eddie Hearn and to Frank Smith, I know a fragment of what they know because they've been doing this forever and a day.
Sure.
And what my objective is, and Eddie talks about agendas and stitch-ups and ideals about bringing him to task without the same energy that's for Frank Warren and Ben Shalom. And again, I make the point, when Eddie comes in the studio, he is a brilliant exponent of not paying or allowing the audience to pay attention to the real facts by taking you off in a direction about incidentals. The issue of when the fight was cancelled is kind of incidental.
Doesn't really matter.
The methodology behind it was to say, the reasons why I'm bringing this up, Eddie, is because a year ago with Conor Benn, and I know it's not very important because it's a year ago and it's going back into the past, but the reasons why it is important is because it's part of the present now.
Yeah.
Because we're discussing Conor Benn and the fact that he has been, according to you and to Conor, been cleared. And I find that a difficult circle to square.
Well, it's not a fact. That's not a fact.
It's not a fact, but the point is that the discussion needs to be had properly.
Yeah.
So when we're having this conversation with Eddie about you cancelled the fight, well done. It wasn't Friday, it was Saturday. You're off on a different tangent. You don't know what you're talking about. And all of this personal stuff that's gone on between myself and Eddie, I genuinely, for the purpose of this discussion and for whoever's interested, I don't dislike Eddie Hearn. I admire him. I think as a promoter, he is very good at what he does. But that doesn't mean that when he does things that are not good for the boxing business, that he shouldn't be beyond reproach. Yeah. He shouldn't be put in a situation where he's held to account. Of course, in order to do that, Eddie's not going to sit there and allow you to do it. He's not going to sit there and say, I welcome you into my world where I'm going to be criticised and perhaps held to account. So what he'll do is he'll bait and switch. And those that think Eddie is wonderful go, whoa, Eddie Hearn, he schooled that idiot Simon Jordan. And those that think Simon Jordan's got something to say of any relevance, they'll have a different view. But all the personal stuff started, if you remember, a year ago when I said to Eddie it was cowardly for you to avoid the press conference. Yeah. That then turned into a litany of observations from Eddie and from Frank Smith about my finances, about where they met me, what the colour of my hair was, what I knew about boxing, how I'd lost the football club. All that was none of that was relevant.
Don't forget the earring.
Forget the earring. None of that was relevant. And the reason why I'm labouring this point is because for you boxing fans that are watching this, the key component is pay attention to the detail. Not pay attention to my version of it. The details are very simple. When we had an argument a year ago, Eddie and I talked about the British Boxing Board of Control having jurisdiction over whichever legitimate laboratory. Yeah. Eddie said that rule didn't exist.
Whether that was UKAD or VADA.
Yeah, it was Rule 31.5. Yeah. It did exist. And then Eddie said, that rule wasn't in place. It was only put onto the statute books in September of last year. But everybody in the fight game knows that the British Boxing Board of Control introduced it in February 22. They didn't write it in the books until September, but everyone was operating with that principle that the British Boxing Board of Control could advocate for any legitimate testing agency. So when people say they don't know what they're talking about, that was the first fact. Then we move on into the territory of what's happened recently with Conor Benn and the behaviour that I think Eddie needs to be accountable for. Now we've got a situation where the British Boxing Board of Control and UKAD have gone into a hearing, sat there and listened to Conor Benn's lawyers argue that the jurisdiction of this test doesn't belong to UKAD, it belongs to the Clean Boxing Programme. It's been through the Clean Boxing Programme's disciplinary process and been cleared. That argument is a reasonable argument. It's a similar sort of argument that Johnny Cochran ran on behalf of O.J. Simpson, which is get him off on a technicality, and to some extent, without comparing the nature of a very heinous crime to this particular instance, you've got a lawyer that's achieved the same outcome, which is don't look here, look here. So now you've got Conor, who is out from underneath the suspension that UKAD have put.
So they've lifted the suspension
with Eddie and Conor saying he's been cleared. By my reckoning, if he hasn't gone through strict liability, because I asked Eddie pointedly, do you believe in strict liability? Yes, I do. So if you believe in strict liability, then you can't suggest that Conor Benn's been cleared, because all that's happened is Conor Benn has managed to overcome in this hearing a jurisdiction. The British Boxing Board of Control have got to step in. And my argument is that the British Boxing Board of Control have got to be all-powerful. They've got to be determining the sport's destiny, because right now you have an existential problem. You have a fighter that's circumvented the system.
So if they're not fit for jurisdiction, then they're not fit for purpose. And
my observation would be to Robert Smith, this is a hill that you have to die on, because the British Boxing Board of Control has to exhibit control over such a significant thing like failed drugs test. And so the question and the debate with Eddie was more about that. And the reasons why I'm going for this soliloquy is forget about the background noises of how much money I may have lost in football and how much more Eddie Hearn knows about boxing than I know, and how much we have a debate about which day the Anthony Joshua fight was stopped on, because there's no problem with that. Neither one of us have a real issue around that. The real issue is what is right for the sport of boxing. I don't want Eddie Hearn booted out of boxing. I don't want Eddie Hearn to not be successful. I don't care either which way. Eddie's like, you want me stitched up, you'd love it to see me booted out. No, I would like people, if it's Frank Warren, if it's Ben Shalom, if it were Callie Sauerland, if it were Bob Arum, and in this instance Eddie Hearn, anybody that ultimately brings the sport of boxing into a very difficult place should have to answer those questions. When a fighter's been suspended currently in bad standing, trying to get other fighters to fight him in the Middle East, putting their boxing licenses at risk, whilst calling the British Boxing Board of Control idiots and generally undermining the whole system, that can't be good, whether it's Eddie, whether it's Frank, whether it's Ben, whether it's Callie, or wherever else, whether it's Mick Hennessy, whoever it is. Right? Anyone behaving in that fashion, it needs to be zeroed in on. If people aren't bothered, if nobody cares and everybody's happy with the Conor Benn situation and everybody's happy with Eddie's behaviour and everybody thinks it's okay, I've made my point, I've said my view. I don't think it's right. I do think there needs to be a look at it. I do think the British Boxing Board of Control should be really, really strong and be really focused and really try to run this sport properly. But if nobody else cares...
Well, I think they do. That's the point of it. I think that when you're talking about lives at risk and we want a clean and level playing field, this sort of stuff needs to be ironed out. It needs to be sorted out. And like you say, whether it's the British Boxing Board of Control, UKAD or VADA, if they have no jurisdiction, then they're not fit for purpose, and they have to. This is a perfect time for a changing of the times, and I think that's what's needed, Simon. And I think that's what's come to light out of this.
Drug tests in sport, whether it's Conor Benn or anyone else, is a significant thing, and it does need to be operated seriously. And if the British Boxing Board of Control have got rules, and they're getting circumnavigated, then the British Boxing Board of Control needs to do something about it, or they need to be disbanded.
The purpose of what we done I think we sort of achieved something.
But the most important thing, Spence,
as in saying, you know, something needs to be done, and I think that it created a lot of interest and a lot of eyeballs are on it, and things that seem to have changed, things that seem to.
And the reason why I spoke to Robert Smith is, as you will recall, Robert Smith sat on this show, I think it was in March time, and said that they were going to take control of this particular situation, and that there was going to be a real set of reactions to the observations that were made to Conor Benn's behaviour, not standing in front of UKAD, to Conor Benn wanting to be licensed again, was going to have to require to go through their processes. So when the next drugs test is failed by a fighter, it's logical that I'm going to ask Robert Smith and remind him of what he said about the Conor Benn situation, at the same time as ask, you know, what was going on with the Joshua fight. So if nothing else, what I hope to achieve, and what we should want to achieve, is a proper, functioning, high-end, empowered, properly financed British Boxing Board of Control that has the courage of its convictions to be able to administer its own rules.
That's it.
Anyway, moving on back to the fight card on Saturday night, and moving on to the maybe the last swan song of an old warrior. I don't know what you think. Derek Chisora, a.k.a. Five Guys.
You brought this into the conversation.
The Five Guys guy.
Great entertainer. Listen, he's been an unbelievable ambassador for boxing.
Did you think he won on Saturday night?
He's a great entertainer. I thought that it was a very close fight, and it could have easily gone the other way. I don't know if I had him a round down. I know it was very close. If he won by a round, if it was a draw or he lost by a round, fair enough. What was that judge doing? 8 rounds in favour of
that was my point.
Derek Chisora. I mean, that was absolutely crazy. But what I witnessed on Saturday night was a guy that looked at all of his 39 years of age. You know, he's been around a long time. He's had 47 fights now. You know, 13 of those are losses. But you look through his record, you look through his resume, you know, he's fought the who's who. He's boxed everybody. His resume is better than anybody's. And every one of them lost on a unanimous decision, lost on a split decision. Like, every one of them has been a real tough fight. I think in his last 6, he's won 2. And that was Pulev, which was unbelievable.
He didn't lose on anything that was vaguely resembling a close fight against Tyson Fury.
But what I'm saying is, Tyson Fury was, but they're all like sort of, they're tough fights. Like the Fury one was a one-sided beatdown. I get that, but what I'm saying is, even the fights with like the first Fury
and
one,
he got knocked out by David Haye.
David Haye was a knockout. But the fights that he has over the 12 rounds, like Dillian White's fights that he's had over 12 rounds. I mean, they are grueling, tough fights. And what we witnessed on Saturday night was a guy that looked like he was walking through treacle. The jab was slow, the right hand, but what we saw was that heart of a warrior and that determination to be able to turn it around. Washington, for me, was winning the fight and winning it comfortably in the end. Derek's clawed his way back in there. You know, Washington had these little moments of that, but what we've witnessed was, I go, come on, Del Boy, it's another hard fight, man. He's in control of his own destiny. He says he wants to get to 50. He wants another 3 fights. If he turned it in tomorrow, I know Derek, since he was a 16-year-old kid, I'd go, I'm happy for you. But listen, I'm not going to stop you doing what you want to do. He feels like there's still a fight left in him. He's going to continue. And we're going to see more Ward Chisora fights. But
what do you think about the audience?
At times I was uncomfortable.
What do you think about the audience's demand for it? Because this relationship has developed with Derek over the years. Initially, it was the relationship wasn't there and they didn't much like him. And over the years, he's developed this relationship where now he's a national treasure to some extent. Right?
They love him.
And he's now a hero in people's minds. And because, you know, when you go to a Derek Chisora fight, you're going to see a fight. Now, he and I have locked horns where I've turned around and said that I didn't want to see the third White Chisora fight because I've seen it before and I want to see bigger and better fights. And every time he steps up, he got beat by world title holders. But that doesn't mean that Derek Chisora isn't a valuable asset to the boxing community. But I do think we're now at a point where, I mean, he'll be delighted that he got the nod because he constantly talks about the unfairness of fights where he thinks he's won fights and gone the other way. This one's definitely gone his way. But I mean, the quantum of money that he would have got for that fight wouldn't have been enormous because the whole fight's been scaled.
You know the situation with that fight, don't you? With who paid for that fight?
Prince Khalid.
Prince Khalid. So I was like, where's this come from?
Derek being a slippery little scrope, he's got his relationship with Prince Khalid, hasn't he?
He's doing work out there with the Saudis and skills challenge and whatnot. He wants to continue to fair play to. Listen, the very casual.
He looked great. I mean, physically on the scales, he looked great.
He did, but the casual fan is going to go, "Oh, Derek Chisora's on great." It's a massive selling point because he has become a national treasure. He's great entertainment in the build-ups. He's great in the press conferences.
Never know what he's going to say.
You never know what he's going to say, but that's the world we live in. People like that. They enjoy that. You know,
and he's a good soul, isn't he?
He's a good man.
By the way,
he's a misunderstood guy.
By the way, Derek, you know where I live, do you? If you do, you can bring that bleeding money around that you owe me, along with some Five Guys from your new restaurant.
That's just reminded me actually that when we done a bit on talkSPORT in the week. I think was it on? Oh no, on the Thursday. You wasn't there. It was at the press conference. I interviewed him.
Right.
That was his first question out of my mouth. I don't know if you've seen that. You probably don't watch my interviews back there.
I try not to, no.
What do you mean?
I tend to watch them when I'm travel sleeping or something. Yeah.
Or when you want to
I'll watch it.
I'll watch
it if Carl's there.
Yeah. Oh, here we go. Yeah, your new best mate. So yeah, we done an interview, and the first thing he come out of his mouth was, "Simon Jordan, I hope you're well, mate. Listen,
good lad.
yeah,
That's very nice of him.
Get well." So yeah, really nice guy. He's good. I think you've got this. Yeah, you've sort of you've built a relationship together now. And Derek's the same. Look, Derek's just one of those guys that fights with his heart on his sleeve. He said to me, like, he'll say, "Was you entertained with that fight on Saturday?" And you go, "Yeah, it was good." Like how you pulled that back and the balls that you showed to pull it back, and the way that you done that. Credit to you, mate. Yeah, it was good, entertaining. He went, "Well, there's your answer. I'll be fighting again." So he's got a valid point.
He's a lot of people suggest that there's coming to a point now where he's putting his health at risk, but I guess the only person that can make that decision is Derek.
Absolutely.
And if Derek wants to go on and put himself in the way of jeopardy, I guess it's his gift to do so.
Yeah.
I hope he knows what he's doing. I think he's made a very good living out of boxing.
That's why I'd love to see him. If he said to me, "Spence, I'm done today," I'd go, "Do you know what? What a career you've had. Incredible career. British, European, British Commonwealth, European champion, box for the world title. What more do you want? You boxed everybody and anybody. What is the purpose now? You got enough money in the bank." He's just one of those.
But I guess it's also something else as well, because once the lights get turned out, they're turned out, aren't they?
He don't like buying a cup of tea, by the way.
Don't like buying anything.
A bit squeaky. He's a bit like Carl Froch, your mate.
Yeah. I've heard that about Carl.
Yeah.
Well, Carl's over in Marbella now, swanning around in my neck of the woods, giving it big and not playing paddle tennis, Carl, I bet.
He FaceTimed me on Thursday, actually.
Did he?
Yeah. He looked like he was having a great time. Nice place he's got.
But he keeps going on about wanting to play me at paddle tennis, and then he writes...
he talked about it the other day.
Yeah, but he doesn't ever turn up. And I said to him also, I'll tell you what I'll do, Carl, is I've got a bunch of mates out in Marbella who'll play paddle, and if you want to get in that gang, not a dicky bird with him.
Really?
Because he can't play.
I don't think
he couldn't let cows ask with a banjo. He talks about the idea of wanting to play paddle, and he tells me that he was a super middleweight champion of the world, which we all know.
Yeah.
And we all know what goes with that.
80,000, don't forget that.
And 80,000 people, and that he is the best thing since sliced bread, and everyone should listen to him. And we all do, and we all pay attention to it. But the paddle tennis court is not for you, Carl.
His bottle's gone.
Yeah. That's it for episode 38 of Talk Boxing with Simon Jordan Spencer Oliver. Don't forget to keep liking and subscribing to the channel. Keep leaving your brilliant questions in the comment section below, and we'll see you next time out.